Now we're going to look at converting decimal numbers to percents. Well, if to go from a percent to a decimal, we drop the percent sign and move the decimal point 2 places to the left. It stands to reason if we're going the other way, we should reverse the process. In other words, if we start with a decimal number, if we move the decimal point 2 places to the right and tack on the percent sign, we get the percent equivalent. So 0.13 is 13%. As far as 0.028, again, move the decimal point 2 places to the right this time and tack on the percent sign. So we get 2.8%. And 1.675 becomes 167.5%. If you're wondering why this works, if we look at 0.13, any number is a fraction over 1. If we want it to be a percent, it needs to be per 100. So I would have to multiply this by 100. But whatever I do to one part of the fraction, I have to do to the other. And so in essence, I'm always taking the numerator, or the decimal form of my number, and multiplying by 100, which kicks the decimal point 2 places to the right. Then instead of writing 13 over 100, I can replace the per 100 with the percent sign. So the shortcut is to just move the decimal point 2 places to the right and tack on the percent sign. But if you get confused, am I supposed to move it right, am I supposed to move it left, then perhaps thinking about it in terms of a fraction might clarify that for you. So down here where it says in general, how do we convert any decimal to a percent? Jot down what you need to help you remember how to convert between the two forms. All right, the last thing we want to look at is converting fractions to percents. Because often what happens is when interest rates are stated, they are stated in terms of mixed numbers. So we have fractions involved. So we want to look at converting when fractions are there. First of all, if we have something like 3/8 and we want it as a percent, it's probably easiest to turn this into a decimal. Because once it's in its decimal form, we know how to deal with converting a decimal to a percent. Now just remember how we convert any fraction into a decimal. You take the numerator divided by the denominator. So 3/8 in its decimal form is 0.375. To get this as a percent, we move the decimal point 2 places to the right and tack on the percent sign. As far as 1/4 is concerned, well, many of you probably know that that is 25%. And if you do, then just go for it, right? You don't need to do any work there. But again, if you're not sure what it is, you can always take numerator divided by denominator. In this case, we get 0.25. And then converting that decimal to its percentage form gives us our 25%. So in general, how do we convert any fraction to a percent? Well, we took the fraction, we took the fraction to its decimal form, and then the decimal form to the percent. One last thing I want to look at are those interest rates that I mentioned that might be expressed as a mixed number. So if we want to convert this to the decimal form, because again, we never ever calculate or do calculations with a number in its percent form. So we do calculations, typically we'll convert it to a decimal form. If I want this in its full decimal form, I'm going to start by converting the fraction. So 1/8 in a decimal is 0.125. So I keep the whole number and I express the fraction as its decimal form. But remember, this is still very much a percent. It's not until I divide by 100 or move the decimal point 2 places to the left that I have fully converted to the decimal form. Okay. Just to show you one more, what if we have 3 5/8? The first thing I want to do is convert that fraction. So I have 3.625, but it is still a percent. So to get the 0.625, I took 5 divided by 8. Again, don't fall into the misconception that just because there's a decimal here, that it is in its decimal form. It's not until we divide by 100 and that decimal point moves 2 places to the left that we're allowed to drop the percent sign, and here is the decimal equivalent. Okay. In the next videos, we're going to move into this to a new concept, something called percent of change.